Today is the anniversary. It's been a year since this rotten piece of human waste was installed officially as president. No, not sworn in, but won the popular vote as it was counted up to that point. Now, the counting continued, and he lost. But this animal won the electoral vote. So, thanks to the Russians, thanks to Facebook, and thanks to Twitter. Now, Michelle Goldberg, who is an opinion writer for the New York Times, relatively new, regular with the New York Times, has a column today that really struck me this morning when I'm trying to get down a cup of coffee and some yogurt. And I'm reading this, and I thought, I've got to share this with you in its entirety. It's not that long. So, this is Michelle Goldberg writing at the New York Times. In the terror-struck and vertiginous days after Donald Trump's election a year ago, as I tried to make sense of America's new reality, I called people who lived or had lived under authoritarianism to ask what to expect. I wasn't looking for concrete predictions. One of the disorienting things about that moment was that no one, no matter how learned, had any idea what was happening here. But I called for insights into how the texture of life changes when an autocratic demagogue is in charge. A secular Turkish journalist told me, her voice sad and weary, that while people might at first pour into the streets to oppose Trump, eventually the protests would probably die out as a sense of stunned emergency gave way to the slog of sustained opposition. The Russian dissident writer Masha Gessen warned that there's no way, with a leader who lays siege to the fabric of reality, there's no way to fully hold on to a sense of what's normal. She told me, quote, "You drift and you get warped." They were both right. This country has changed in the past year, and many of us have grown numb after unrelenting shocks. What now passes for ordinary would have once been inconceivable. The government is under the control of an erratic racist who engages in nuclear brinkmanship on Twitter. He is dismantling the State Department, defending the hollowing out of the diplomatic corps by saying on Fox News, "I'm the only one that matters." He publicly pressures the Justice Department to investigate his political opponents. He's called for reporters to be jailed, and his administration demanded that a sportscaster who criticized him be fired. Official government statements promote his hotels. You can't protest at all. You'd never do anything else if you tried. After the election, many liberals pledged not to normalize Trump. But one lesson of this year is that we don't get to decide what normal looks like. Last month, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, took an unannounced trip to Saudi Arabia, where he met with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who later had a number of his rivals, including a Trump critic, Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, put under arrest. In the Washington Post, David Ignatius described Kushner's talks with Prince Mohammed this way, quote, "The two princes are said to have stayed up until nearly 4 a.m. several nights, swapping stories and planning strategy." A year ago, that sentence would have been unintelligible as a description of American diplomacy, even as a wry joke. But this nightmare year has upended assumptions about the durability of the rules, formal and informal, governing our politics. There's a metaphysical whiplash in how quickly alarm turns into acceptance and then into forgetfulness. It was astonishing when Trump installed Steve Bannon as his chief strategist, a man who had previously run a white nationalist tabloid. Now it feels like ages ago that he was even in the White House. He's been gone less than 3 months. It was staggering when credible evidence emerged that one of the president's former national security advisors, Sebastian Gorka, was a member of a Nazi-aligned Hungarian group called the Vitezi Rend. And even more staggering, when the revelation didn't immediately end his White House career. Hannah Arendt once wrote of the role vulgarity played in undermining liberalism in pre-totalitarian societies. She wrote this, quote, "The temporary alliance between the elite and the mob rested largely on this genuine delight with which the former, the elite, watched the latter, the mob, destroy respectability." End quote. Hannah Arendt. I thought of this when I saw Ted Nugent, who on several occasions called for Barack Obama to be killed, grinning in a photograph taken in the Oval Office, or Kellyanne Conway appearing on television to urge America to buy Ivanka Trump merchandise. In this administration, crassness has become a weapon, annihilating social codes that once restrained political behavior, signaling that old standards no longer apply. Lately, the pace of shocks has picked up, even if our capacity to process them has not. Trump's former campaign chairman has been indicted. One of his former foreign policy aides has pled guilty to lying to the FBI about his attempts to collude with Russia. His Commerce Secretary, Wilbur Ross, turns out to have retained a stake in a company with business ties to the son-in-law of Russian President Vladimir Putin. The new head of the Environmental Protection Agency's Science Advisory Board once claimed that our air is, quote, too clean for optimum health, end quote. USA Today recently reported that the president has nominated several members of his clubs to federal jobs. Never in modern history, USA Today said, quote, has a president awarded government posts to people who pay money to his own companies, end quote. In another administration, this would have been a major scandal. In this one, it barely registers. How can America ever return from this level of systematic derangement and corruption? I wish there was someone I could ask, but we know more about how countries slide into autocracy than how they might climb out of it. It's been a year, and sometimes I'm still poleaxed by grief at the destruction of our civic inheritance. In moments of optimism, I think that this is just a hideous interregnum, and that in a brighter future, we'll watch prestige dramas about the time we almost lost America while members of the current regime grow old in prison. But in my head, I hear the song that closed out Trump rallies like a satanic taunt or an epitaph for democracy. You can't always get what you want. It's no longer possible to give a general prediction about where the country's going to go. We have an insane person, an illiterate person, a dysfunctional person who is at the head of the government. And the people who have the power to remove him legally and peacefully and constitutionally just fucking will not do it. because he is a useful idiot. That's the way the Republicans see him. They can put up with his tweets and his bullshit and his insults because they know in the end, these crypto fascists, they know in the end, they will get from this asshole what they want. The Republican Party is not in place to govern. The Republican Party is in place to steal, to loot, and to destroy.